Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. I'm Helena, and I am so excited to share with you today my excited plans for my Hobonichi lineup in 2026. This is not going to be an unboxing video, although I placed my Hobonichi order within the first hour after launch. And I do recognize that being Australian, I am in an incredibly lucky, privileged place where 11 a.m. in Japan is only noon here in Australia. So I was able to place my order on my lunch break. I have recently been informed that my order has shipped, but I'm not expected to receive my parcel until next Monday. Next week, when it arrives, you bet I will be opening it up for you and sharing with you everything that I purchased from the Hobonichi store and learn more about whether you placed your orders and what designs, books, and accessories captured your hearts as well as mine. In the meantime, I thought I can soothe the time of waiting for my order by taking stock of exactly what each of my books will be for and how I intend to make the most of it in 2026. So, some of you know that I discovered Hobonichi in 2023. It was already the middle of the year, so I had long missed their launch. But because I heard so many wonderful things about how exceptional the Tomoe River paper is for fountain pen users such as myself, I purchased this 2023 Hobonichi A6 Techo in the spring start that I began using as a daily baby journal for my son, who was just 8 months old at the time. After a year of using my first Hobonichi Techo, I was completely, utterly head over heels. In 2024, I went to Japan and purchased this Hobonichi cousin in the spring start that I used as an everything book. With its larger size and greater variety of spreads, I thought I could fit my whole life and my happy memories about my growing baby within these books. But as I've shared on my channel before through my Techo Kaigis, this didn't end up working for me and how my brain works, at least in this season of my life. I found it quite messy and chaotic that I had dentist appointments listed alongside precious memories of my family, and then turning the page to find a 2-page vent about all the stress I was experiencing at work. So I decided deliberately that I would try swinging the pendulum as far as I could the other way and going full on compartmentalized with my planner system in 2025. And that's where I spent the first 3 months finishing up this Hobonichi Cousin Spring Start. But then I introduced back into my rotation an A6 Techo for daily toddler journaling, as well as two of my very first Hobonichi weeks. One with a Yumi Kitagishi beautiful wallpaper cover that I used as a health and wellness tracker, and the Insoro Bijitsukai cover that I used exclusively for work tasks, events, and planning. Even when I made this purchase, I knew that I was creating quite a challenge for myself with this ambitious lineup of journals. And indeed, one of the very first problems that I encountered was how, by having things compartmentalized, and while there was a certain organization that I felt in the benefits of having multiple books, I nevertheless immediately realized the folly when I would have a personal event or a doctor's appointment listed in this journal for the very same week I would have work tasks, teaching, journal article deadlines listed in this book. Meanwhile, trying to then repeat all of that in the first 3 months on these pages, and then with events, birthday parties in this book, it meant that it was physically quite challenging to have everything opened up on the one page where I can just see what my schedule is and all the tasks that I needed to get done on that day. I don't begrudge any of my experiences of whether I was trying for one book in 2024 or spread out across up to 4 books in 2025, because each of those experiences taught me so much about what planning and organization looks like for me. Armed with that knowledge and that wisdom, I feel so confident and excited about planning my 2026 lineup. But before I get into that, I did want to share with you the story of what my ordering process was like. I have been delighted watching all the unboxings, especially this week from people who went to retailers in person all around the world and picked up their orders on launch day. I also know many of you in my community decided to be more mindful about your purchasing practices this year and deliberately avoided purchasing from Hobonichi on launch day. And you're taking your time, risking the fact that some things are sold out in order to place a more peaceful, more slow, more gentle order. I love all of your stories across the full spectrum. And one of the beautiful things about being a part of this stationery community on YouTube is just hearing everybody's different approaches and ethos when it comes to stationery consumption and understanding how and why each of you chose the approach that you chose. So, as I said, being Australian, I benefit from the easy time difference between us and Japan. At first, I didn't realize that the launch had begun. And in fact, I was at work in the morning. At 12 o'clock, I broke for lunch. And on my way out the door, I saw that Yoseka was doing their launch party and live stream. And so I dipped into that, thinking that I would spend the next couple of hours whenever launch was going to begin for me in order to just get really excited and share in the collective hype and the collective joy for the Hobonichi launch. I started their video, and what I noticed in the live chat was over and over again people saying, "Oh, I've placed my order successfully. Oh, my order went through." And I was thinking at first, wait, are they ordering from Yoseka, as in pre ordering, or are they actually talking about the Hobonichi site? So I did pop in and realize that the Hobonichi site was indeed live and ready for people's orders. However, this was 5 minutes after launch, and I immediately got hit with a 504 error. But I think I just refreshed once 2 minutes later, and the whole site was back up and it never crashed for me again. I could have hardly hoped for a smoother process. I added everything that I wanted to cart. When I tried to check out, I was greeted by the little waiting room sign saying they were managing the server load and I would just need to stay put for 20 minutes before my cart would be ready to check out. That worked out perfectly for me because that coincided with when I hopped in the car and we drove off to our local Korean restaurant for a delicious lunch. Once we were seated at the restaurant, 20 minutes had passed. So I opened up the website again and I found that not only had I been moved through the waiting room as promised, I had actually already been moved in there about 4 minutes earlier than their estimated time frame. I checked out, paid for everything, got everything that I wanted, and had absolutely no trouble or issues, except for one tiny little snafu that was my own fault. So 10 minutes after I placed the order, I was so relieved and happy that it was pretty much as drama free as I could have hoped. When I happened to be scrolling back through the invoice that Hobonichi sent me, and it dawned on me that part of my whole plan for my journaling ecosystem in 2026, I forgot to purchase my cousin. I got the covers, I got the accessories, I definitely got my A6 Techo and the move-in cover that I had my eye on, but I forgot to buy the cousin book. So there was maybe 2 minutes of mild anxiety where I had to go through their FAQ and find out, well, what happens when you've missed something that you wanted to purchase and you need to add it back into your order. Obviously, it had only been 10 minutes since I placed my order, so I knew that it probably hadn't been packed or sent on its way to me. However, Hobonichi's official frequently asked questions page under how do I modify an order or how do I add an item to my order, it just very blankly tells you you can't. So it says once you've made the order, no changes are possible. So you actually have to then look through the list of questions again and click on the question that says, well, how do I cancel an order? And I found out that it is extremely easy. So as long as they haven't packed your order, you click one button in your account, it cancels the whole thing. And in my case, I later found out that the refund for that order happened immediately and matched the exact amount that I paid. So there wasn't any funny business with credit card processing and changing, shifting exchange rates that meant that I potentially got back less than what I had paid. Nothing like that at all. All of it was so smooth, so swift, so professional. And I simply placed my order again, this time with the cousin. I was also happy to find out that my shipping rate didn't increase at all. So it felt like better value that as I was already paying 57 Australian dollars for shipping, that it didn't really seem dependent on the size of my order, at least in that band. And the second time I checked out with my full order, I didn't encounter the waiting room or any kind of countdown, and I was able to check out immediately. With all of that, there were literal moments in the following 24 hours where I'd stop and almost pinch myself and say, did I dream of making that order? Because compared to last year, or the refreshing or the reading testimonies on Reddit, watching people's videos about the various dramas that they encountered, staying up overnight, I mean, that could not have been more uneventful, right? With the exception of that tiny little mistake that was my own. I was so pleased to see that Hobonichi has seemed to undertaken all the measures necessary in the backstage in order to make that launch experience as successful and painless as it could have been. Because I never intended to purchase the Junji Ito covers, I did not anticipate how popular it would be. So my heart does go out to those of you who really coveted a Junji Ito cover or accessory. And from reports that I've heard online, their covers were sold out within 10 minutes of launch. So I am sorry if you were one of the people who had your heart set on one of those covers and you weren't able to get it. If you were one of the lucky people who snapped it up at launch, I'd love to hear your story as well. But for everyone else, I keep my fingers crossed for you that you will see a restock notification very soon. I thought that I would take you through my planning, designing, dreaming process for how I'm going to make the most of my two Hobonichi books when they arrive next week. So this year, what has worked absolutely beautifully for me without question is my A6 Techo. And this is one of the ones where I was so lucky that the 2025 paper issues did not affect me at all. So, as far as I can tell, this entire book has not had any problems with a paper. I only suffered paper issues in my 2 Hobonichi weeks where I would have bleed through, blooming, just inconsistent paper performance on a couple of pages. And then I would have 1 or 2 pages that are fine. And then I would have 1 or 2 pages that are back to bad. So this one was a little bit of a mixed bag depending on the week that I happened to be working in. So the easiest thing that I'm going to note down here is my A6 toddler journal. I'm going to be keeping that journal in its forthcoming Moomin cover exactly the same. This is perhaps my favorite journal to be working in because as my son turns 4 next year, he is growing more and more into his personality every day. Scarcely a day goes by without him saying something new, asking a penetrating, insightful question, doing a cute little dance. Like right now, his favorite song is Pink Pony Club, and he knows all the lyrics and he sings along every time we play it for him at home or in the car. And the other day, I was getting him dressed in his pajamas and he decides to riff on the lyrics and he's singing a new chorus that after the line, I want to keep dancing at the Pink Pony Club, he says, I want to keep standing in the Pink Pony Inn. I was like, where did you get these ideas from? So it's like little things like that that I am so thankful I have this sweet little daily journal where I get to capture those fleeting, ephemeral memories that are so precious to me that I know I will love to look back on when he's 5, 10, or 25. So that journal is going to be staying in my rotation and being exactly the same. So, where the planning really begins for me is what am I going to do about my new A5 cousin and how I am going to bring in all the things that have worked for me through my experiences keeping a cousin in 2024 and then keeping 4 books in 2025 while mitigating against the things that I learned the hard way doesn't align with the way my brain works or how I wish to feel when I am in these books. Given the increasing costs of Hobonichi books, I want to be more deliberate in how I make the most of all their spreads and all the features that they have to offer. This, my very first Hobonichi cousin, was a book full of experiments. As I've shown a full flip through of this book on my channel before, I'm not going to go into things in depth, but if this is your first time watching one of my videos, I'll just very quickly show you what worked and what didn't for me. So I started using the yearly spread as a table of contents where I would write 3 or 4 words about what I wrote in each day so that I could have a place for me to easily refer back to. I think this is a wonderful idea, but I found that it just added an extra level of an administrative burden where every couple of weeks I had to remember to flip back to this spread and write a summary of each page. Maybe in a new season of my life, that could work. And indeed, as my son has gotten older, in many ways, he is so much more independent. And I have so much more time for journaling than I did back in April 2024. Nevertheless, I would rather remain more realistic and modest with my ambitions than push myself towards a perfectionistic standard that ends up burning me out. After all, stationery is meant to be a fun hobby that restores our energy, not drains it as though it was some kind of work obligation. I had a little bit more luck with my monthlies. But here's the other mistake that I did, which is more or less my monthlies were an extension of my yearlies. The yearly summarized what I did on each day in 3 or 4 words. The monthlies, I would again summarize the key highlights of what I did on each day. So you can start to see the work I was creating for myself because of these arbitrary standards I had created. And of course, each spread was marked by beautiful decorations, stickers, and all of this took time and energy. And at the end of every month, I would come back and I would summarize how overall in that month, what I had celebrated, learned, released, welcomed, and who or what I was inspired by. While I don't think I want to keep up with the practice of summarizing what I did on each day, and certainly not across 2 different spreads after journaling in the daily pages, I absolutely want to hold on to this monthly reflective practice of summarizing the highlights from each month. Then we come to the weekly pages, which was, before getting this book, the spread that I was most excited to invest my time and energy in after seeing the breathtaking weekly spreads that people like Helen from the Coffee Monsters Co. designs across all her videos. Here I highlight all the activities of each day, and on the left-hand column, I track the hours I slept, and at the end of the week, I also note down the books that I was reading, TV shows, movies, or even YouTube channels that I was watching, and also any albums or podcasts I found myself listening to. I also really love this summary because for me, this became something of a media log. And I really loved that after months had passed, I was able to look back on these columns and see what I was captured by and what I was deeply immersed in those moments of my life. But what didn't work for me was trying to do something akin to time blocking in these columns. I eventually gave up on weekly time blocking around August to September. So I did push myself to give it a good go and indeed desperately tried to pick it back up, only to find myself failing to stick with it again. There was even a week where I tried a different approach inspired by my conversations with From Jen in her comment section, where I wrote down with an orange Midori pencil what my time blocked plans were for the week right at the start of the week. And then using my Uniboard jet stream, I would fill in how I actually ended up spending my time on top of it. That seemed ingenious to me at the time, but in practice, it was so difficult for me to read my notes with these multi layers of writing, and I very quickly abandoned this idea as well. And I've come to concede that true time blocking for me only works on a digital calendar. And I just, for the life of me, cannot do time blocking in analog form. What I'm thinking is that if I wasn't doing the repetitive task of writing down a summary of every single day in my monthly spreads, in addition to long form journaling in the daily pages, I may be able to maintain the idea of keeping the yearly spread as a table of contents. Yes, it can feel like an administrative burden at the end of every week or fortnight when I'm going back in to fill it out. But the reality is, it really doesn't take very long when all I have to write is 3, 4 words to jog my memory of what each day was about. And I know that future Helena, when hopefully she's got multiple cousins, each documenting a different year of her life, that table of contents would be invaluable to quickly flip through and find, when was that time where we traveled to New Mexico? When was the time when Augie fell off his bike and had to get stitches? knock on wood, that doesn't happen. So the yearly spreads are a place that comparatively wouldn't require as much work, but would create a resource that makes it so much easier for me to review this book in the future. So that means if I'm not repeating myself across the yearlies and the monthlies, that frees me up to use the monthlies for something else. I confess that I love seeing people's monthlies when they draw a different picture for every day of their lives, or they print out a photograph from each day. I believe this new Hobonichi app that they intend to launch in December provides an option for paid subscription members where it will take the photographs in your phone and resize them to the exact specifications of the Hobonichi boxes and columns and allow subscribers to take it to a photo printing place like 7-Eleven in Japan and get them printed out as stickers. Some of my commenters, while speculating about this feature, did want to emphasize that resizing pictures is very simple to do on any word processing app such as Word. Even without the subscription, there will be ways to do that if I wanted to create a beautiful spread at the end of every month where I can see my life in a picture a day. However, I also know that that's the sort of thing that I can get very perfectionistic over. What if my pictures don't look cohesive placed next to each other? What if I forget to take a photo on a particular day and you see gaps across all my monthly spreads? All of that I can see exhausting me and wearing me out rather than creating a space for joy and relaxation. So I'm thinking one of my most successful experimentations this past year has been using my Hobonichi weeks as a health and wellness planner. I wonder if I can put my health trackers in my monthly spreads. And indeed, there are a few things that I've done across the last 2 years that I think could be improved in my upcoming Hobonichi cousin. For example, I've always tracked my sleep on a weekly basis. And honestly, weekly, it doesn't tell me very much about what different patterns mean. So, yes, I might be able to see, oh, I didn't sleep very much on Tuesday, but I made up for it with almost a full 8 hours of sleep on Friday. But it doesn't tell me much about the patterns. Why didn't I get that much sleep on Tuesday? Why did things get better on Friday? And I actually think a monthly spread where I track my sleep and other health measures would be so much more informative for me. Because it may be that I realize that, let's say, I always get my migraines during my period, which I do. And that kind of information is actually something that I could work on. Other things that I've been tracking, like my mood and my anxiety, all of that, again, I think makes a lot more sense to look at it monthly rather than weekly. There are also a number of things that I have been tracking that no longer serve me. Like, for example, I track when I've taken vitamins, when I've washed my face and put on sunscreen, when I've had cuddles with my son. And these things are pretty much habit that it's almost become a bit of a chore for every single week to go in and color in a dot. For me, I love using trackers when I'm trying to introduce a new habit into my life. In order to establish that routine, I can remember to do each of those things by following a tracker and also give myself a little dopamine hit when I can see that I've gone through an entire week where I've taken a walk every single day without fail. Once it becomes established, I automatically put on my walking shoes and go for a walk at the end of every workday, weather permitting. And it's no longer something that is meaningful or valuable for me to track. So, some of these habit trackers I'm going to let go, and I'm only going to keep the trackers and the measures that are most useful for me in my A5 cousin. Now, the part of me that is a little bit nervous is I really, really want to give memory keeping a good go in my weekly spreads again. So, as I showed, I wasn't able to keep up with that very much. And over time, I found it too draining financially, as well as in terms of my energy, to have these highly decorated spreads with detail hand lettering, stickers, tip ins, collaging. And yet, this past year, having given up the practice of memory keeping in a weekly spread, I've nevertheless continued to admire those spreads in the content creators that I follow. And one highlight for me has been Marie Hiraya, who uses her sticker collection in her weekly spreads in a way that feels so entirely expressive and original. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm not going to treat it like an accurate time blocking measure. My work involves a lot of small tasks, so it's not unusual for me to do a lot of things that only take up half an hour. And in these tiny grid sizes, I might have a meeting that only took half hour, but simply the process of writing can't fit into that one line, and it looks very messy when I have many back to back half hour meetings, tasks, or events. So, treating this like it's some sort of accurate log of how I spend every 30-minute segment of my day is for me meaningless. So, what I would rather do is to create a more flexible and more expressive log of how I spent my day, including the small but beautiful moments that offer me wonder and awe. As I've learnt through my toddler journal, there are so many conversations that I have with my son that if I didn't have this book, I would forget within the week or the month, and I would lose all of those wonderful moments to look back on. I want my weekly spreads in my 2026 cousin to feel the same way, but for me, outside of my role as a mother or a partner. I'd love to have my weekly spreads as a place where I could share the beautiful flower that I saw on my walk, that I took 2 minutes to slow down and literally smell the roses. I want to be able to document the song that I heard that uplifted me, or the conversation with a dear friend that made me see myself differently because I got to see myself through their eyes. Those are the precious moments that I want to be able to capture. And for me, it doesn't matter if my lunch with my friend was actually 12 to 2, but I'm only coloring in 12 to 1. I actually just want this space to be a place where I can record all the mundane, beautiful moments that make up a life. The other thing that has worked really well for me, and I didn't discover this until almost halfway through my work planner, is using the Alastair method in order to plan out my work tasks. One of the things that didn't work for me when I had this Hobonichi cousin in 2024 is that when I managed my daily tasks, I would, let's say, schedule a meeting with a colleague, right? I would flip to the day where that meeting was meant to happen. I would write down that event, and then I would forget about it after a couple of days. And I might flip through and flip through, journaling every day. And then the day that I had scheduled that meeting, I'd open it up and realized that either I had 1 hour to run to campus and make it in time for that meeting, or that I had missed an early meeting altogether by the time I sat down and started writing in this book. So for me, what I learned in 2024 is that it doesn't make sense for me to spread out my tasks day by day. Now, that said, If my weekly spreads were a place that I wasn't keeping for expressive and creative memory keeping, I would probably try to tuck my to do list somewhere in here. Not that I actually think there's any space for it, but the weekly spreads is really where I think weekly tasks make sense. But I know having to share that space between the precious memories and the dental appointments, that's not really going to work for me. And it's going to create that sense of chaos and messiness that I didn't like about having this one book. So, what I'm thinking is that I could try segregating one day in each week where I create a little space, maybe taking up half the page that I use as my weekly to do list. And I have a lot of data to go back on and explore which are the days that I have the least to write about. And I suspect it would be one of the weekdays. So if I picked a weekday where I have the fewest work meetings, teaching commitments, something like a Monday or a Friday would be the days where it makes the most sense for me to keep a weekly to do list. So I believe I can very easily cordon out a little box and recreate the Alistair method in that spread. Perhaps use bookmarks, sticky notes, so that I can always flip to that page week by week and make sure that I'm using it to track all of my tasks. And I am really excited to go back to a system where my events, appointments, and tasks across all the different dimensions of my life are being kept in the one place. So I no longer have to have multiple pages open in order to cross reference, right? So I have teaching at 9 a.m., and then I have an appointment at 12 p.m., and then I have a work meeting at 4 p.m. I don't have to constantly triangulate what I'm getting up to in any given day across multiple books. So that brings me to my dailies. What I did in 2024 with my first cousin is that every single day I would write where in the world I am located. The second line, I would write the weather. And in 2024, I experimented with writing my mood at the time of drafting my entry. But I didn't find that very informative because my mood changes throughout the day. And I can imagine it working for somebody else, but it just wasn't that informative for me to know how I was feeling. On the left hand side, I would draw a tarot card at the start of every day that I used as kind of a thinking prompt or guiding principle for something that I wanted to pay a little bit extra attention or give a little bit more care to. I would then write down an intention for the day. The way that I treated this particular prompt was that I would write the one thing that was my priority for the day. And this is really an ongoing practice that I've had over the last 5 or 6 years of my life after experiencing some quite severe work burnout. Is not to say I need to do 200 things to be worthy this day, or I need to achieve some impossible standard in order to prove myself valuable, but to rather say, what is one thing that I could do today that is worthy of my full attention and care? And if all I achieved was that one thing, I could be proud of myself. I wrote an affirmation for each day, which I later learned is really more of a mantra. And that would often be either some words of wisdom that I want to be reminded of throughout the day, or it could even be taken from something that I was reading at the time. And then I wrote one thing that I'm grateful for. I always wrote a subheading for tasks at the same place on each page across most pages. And there I would check off all the things that I needed to do. I got this book while I was on holidays in Japan, so I had a lot of time when my son was taking a nap in the middle of the day or when he went down for bedtime in the early evening, and I would just be collaging and pasting in. This was a day where we went to Tokyo Skytree, so I had the ticket for the building. There was a stamp at the very, very top of the tower where I stamped onto a pamphlet and then I cut it out and pasted it in this book. And this was the photograph that the professional photographer took of us at the top of the sky tree that I printed out on my Instax Mini and then I pasted it in as a tip in. I was watching Tori on Paper's recent video in which she talked about a particularly visceral analogy for how it feels like for her when ephemera are stuck onto these thin Hobonichi pages, and she described it as feeling like a scab. That revelation struck me so powerfully because she gave words to some discomfort I've always felt about my attempts to paste ephemera in this Hobonichi cousin. So this was packaging, cardboard packaging from a block of vegan chocolates that I really enjoyed. And I deliberately tore out the logo from the front of the box and pasted it in here, while my son also got to have a little bit of fun with his crayons all around the side. And it is particularly because this is cardboard and it's quite thick compared to the thinness of the paper that has always made this page feel very uncomfortable to me. I had a similar thing where I ordered some coffee beans from this company and they sent me this wonderful thank you card with my order and tipping it in again, postcard on these papers. It's always made these pages feel uncomfortable. And I didn't know why until Tori on Paper named it so potently. I admit I don't feel that sense of scabbiness when it's a tip in or when what I've pasted in is quite thin, especially with things like ticket stubs or receipt paper, even this origami paper and standard stickers. They don't feel the same kind of ickiness, but more functionally, ickiness aside, what frustrated me was the way that while I'm flipping through these pages, because these cardboard pieces are so thick and so large, it would constantly land on these pages and make it harder for me to flip through to the precise day that I wanted to find. What I'm going to do with my daily pages is to cool off with pasting in big, thick ephemera and collage elements, maintaining my daily prompts, although I want to give a little bit more thought to rethinking some of them. For example, I actually keep a gratitude log on my phone in an app called Day One. And I've been doing that for around 6 or 7 years, which means that I have gotten to a point in that app where every single day it shows me all the things that I expressed gratitude for over the last 6 or 7 years of my life. And it brings me an enormous amount of joy to be able to have all those records in the one place. So even in this Hobonichi cousin last year, I felt like I was repeating myself and having to constantly rewrite something that I was grateful for after logging it in my app. But I'm not going to be too perfectionistic about these prompts either. And I'm excited to be guided by what works for me in that season of my life. So maybe I want to draw tarot cards for a month and then take a break for a month and do something else. My friend Libby is currently in the process of designing reflective thinking cards that will help workers find a sense of intentionality within their roles. And I'm really excited to purchase a deck of her cards when they are manufactured and maybe even trying that for a month or two. I think the big thing for me is knowing when it's okay to evolve in these pages and to not see it as a failure. Just like my example with keeping habits, there are times when tracking daily habits are vital for turning a new behavior or a desired behavior into something that I do unconsciously. But then it becomes a chore when, after it's been established as a true habit, that I am ticking it off for the sake of ticking it off. So I'm going to bring that perspective into my 2026 cousin and understand how and when I am going to need certain things in my life and how and when it is okay to let them go or set them aside to welcome new practices and new journaling rituals. So, the kind of accessible forms of decorating that I would do in my daily pages is indeed pasting in little pamphlets and mementos, such as the Tokyo Skytree stamp, or a ticket stub, or a little scrap like the logo from a receipt. And when I keep that paper really thin, it's not going to overly bulk up my book, but it's also not going to create that really clunky thing in the middle of my book that keeps wanting to fly open, even when I'm trying to find another page. I was recently sent this incredible package from Ieebee, who offered me this lovely gift box full of washi tapes inspired by Monet's paintings. There are 27 washi tape designs in total, with quite a large number of them, including these exquisite foil details that I absolutely love. Each tape has a small sample, but the treat here really is in the variety. It's like a box of chocolates where you get a taster of every painting, every design, and every color scheme. So I think something like this is going to make it so much easier for me to reach over and tip in a photograph or create a little bit of border, a little bit of design. They also sent me this incredible packet of vintage photographs of beautiful everyday items. None of these stickers repeat, so I'm going to have to be quite brave about using up my favorites. But there's everything from paintings to here butterfly books, teacups, bird cages, butterfly wings. It actually reminds me of walking through the V&A Museum. I love it so much. And these are exactly the kinds of stickers that will make it so much easier for me and take the pressure off from adding decorations to my daily spreads without feeling like I need to sit down and commit 6 hours a day to creating the most beautiful collages. So I really want to thank Ieebee for sending me just these extra little sweet things that I could use to decorate my Hobonichi cousin. And if you're at all interested in picking up any of their washi tapes or stickers for yourself, I'll include a link to their store as well as a code that they offered me that will give you a sizable discount for anything you may wish to purchase. There is one final thing that I wanted to reflect on for how I use my daily pages. And that is one of the most difficult things that I grappled with when I kept my 2024 Hobonichi Cousin as my one book was the days, fortunately far and few in between, where I experienced more emotionally tumultuous events. I used a lot of these daily pages to process the whirlwind of anxiety, fear, heartache, grief that I was experiencing at the time. But after I poured my guts out on these pages, it became painful to flip back through even when I had recovered from some of the more painful events, to see them laid out in all their anguish on these daily pages. And while I dare say, I think it's extremely healthy to be able to accept your life as it is, with the bitter, with a sweet, there was something about the emotions that I had released into this book that I wanted instead to be able to compost rather than to keep and have these records that almost provided entryways into rumination. What I'm going to experiment with in my 2026 cousin is when I encounter really challenging events in my life, and perhaps even an A5 page is not big enough to contain the emotions and thoughts that I want to process, I'm going to repurpose one of my many blank notebooks. I have here a Midori A5 grid notebook and the Hobonichi grid notebook that I purchased last year. And I will dedicate one of those books to processing really difficult emotions and a place where I feel like I can safely pour out the emotional gunk and also not worry about doing flip throughs, videos, photographs of these pages that may not be professional or appropriate to put out on the internet. However, rather than keeping a record where I pretend my life is perfect and I never experience a negative emotion in my life, I thought that I could do something to mark the days where there was an abundance of difficult emotions that I wanted to process off these pages. I don't know if I could put in a sticker or a stamp, something like a black star or a red heart, something that indicates to me that some overflow journaling needed to happen in my other books. And I can acknowledge that I had a difficult day, that maybe my anxiety flared up, or I was experiencing quite a lot of sorrow or grief about a particular event. And I can always have the other book as a record of the difficult and human things that I've survived, while also maintaining spaces where I could flip back and know that I'm going to encounter pages after pages that remind me why my life was worth living and worth celebrating. My last challenge for myself is that once I've received my physical A5 cousin, A6 Techo, I'm going to go flip through to the pages at the back where Hobonichi always includes these sweet little spreads where you can record, your favorites, a timetable, a graph, and my 100. And I really want to have a good go at using these spreads. And I want to thank Michael in the margins, who gave me an absolutely genius idea that I will 100% be adopting in my toddler book, in which he suggested using the My 100 as a place to record a bucket list. And I can think of 100 easily adventures that I want to have with my son. So I want to keep them. I might do something fun, like kind of having different categories, 4 different categories for them, where maybe one could be kind of like adventures, in the outdoors, like going horse riding with him or going hiking with him, or even say 25 different places that I want to take him, from landmarks to cities to countries. And then I could have little things that maybe we make together. So maybe we have a painting session together, maybe we have a Play Doh session together. So kind of like arts and crafts or things that we do at home. And then we could have maybe even movies that I want to watch with him. He watched My Neighbor Totoro for the very first time as his first movie last month. And I would love this idea of including maybe 5 more movies that I want to show him in 2026. So thank you so much, Michael, for that brilliant idea. For myself, I think that I could use my 100 to potentially list down all the books that I've been reading. Last year, I did actually read exactly 100 books. That was my goal. And I was pretty much on track to hit that goal by November. So, what I did was in November and December, for my 100th book, I read The Count of Monte Cristo, just so I could like really like spread that out until the 31st of December. And that was really fun. So I might do that. The favorites in the A6 Techo is a perfect spread for me to note down the random and adorable things that my son is interested in. So it could be the movie that we watched, his favorite books, his favorite songs, right? Pink Pony Club, is going in there. But for me, I don't think that simply having these boxes, 12 favorites, necessarily makes sense for the full year. So I do actually wonder, given the number is 12, I could use this solely to list down my favorite restaurants that I went to in the year because I really, really love eating out with my husband. That's one of our favorite activities to do together. So, listing down the highlights of where we dined, that could be quite fun to fit within a spread like this. And once I get the book, I'll take stock of what the 2026 book includes. And I'm going to challenge myself to think of fun ways to use every single one of these spreads in the back. Let's see how I go. So, thank you so much for joining me today in this reflection, brainstorm, critical analytical session about how I can make the most of my 2026 planners when they arrive. Please tell me in the comments below if you placed your order, when you placed your order, what you bought. Have you received your order yet and have been happily enjoying it? Or if, like me, you are eagerly awaiting for its arrival in your mailbox. I'm thinking I will come to you next week with hopefully either my unboxing video for my Hobonichi planners, or if it doesn't arrive in time, I might do a more in depth review of my journaling ecosystem for quarter 3. I cannot wait to see you in my next video. And I thank you so much for being here and being a part of this kind and principled community. Can't wait to learn more about your plans for your 2026 journal and planner lineup. Until then, I wish you a wonderful week ahead. Take good care of yourselves, and bye bye.